2023 meeting of the City Council. This is actually a workshop. I'd like to go ahead and call this workshop to order and ask for the roll call.
Mayor Sanchez.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Kime. Here. Councilmember Joyce.
Present.
Councilmember Robinson.
Present.
Councilmember Weiss.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Deputy Mayor Kime, would you like to lead us, please?
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So this is a workshop on the budget, and we have this into, let's see, five general items here. So the first one is for fiscal year 2023-2024 general fund overview. We begin with a report by Ms. Jill Moya, Financial Services Director. Ms. Moya?
All right, good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Jill Moya, Financial Services Director, here to provide a presentation on item number 1, which is the proposed general fund budget for fiscal year 23-24. I will start with a quick general overview of the proposed budget. We are presenting a balanced budget where expenses are less than revenues and reserves or one-time monies are not used to cover ongoing costs. The proposed budget meets all reserve obligations, including the Healthy City and Economic Stabilization Reserves. It also reflects the relaxation of the hiring freeze that was implemented during the pandemic in order to restore and improve service levels to the community. Additionally, we are always keeping in mind Council's strategic priorities when considering budget addition recommendations. Here's a high-level look at the proposed fiscal year 23-24 general fund budget. Total revenues are $203.8 million and expenses are $200.6 million, which would result in a surplus of $3.2 million. These proposed expenses are to maintain our current service levels. For fiscal year 23-24, staff recommends adding $1.1 million of ongoing expenses and $0.6 million for one-time items. With these additions, our projected surplus would be $1.51 million. Of the proposed revenue budget of $203.8 million, 3 of the main revenue categories are property tax, sales tax, and transient occupancy tax, or TOT. Our property tax and sales tax budgets were developed using technical forecasts created by our property and sales tax consultants. These revenues are expected to increase due to new development and increasing property values. For TOT revenues, while the percentage increase of the proposed budget compared to the current year budget appears to be high, it is in line with fiscal years 21-22 actual revenue receipts. This graph shows how the revenue has been trending over the past 6 years. Property tax is in blue, sales tax is red, and TOT is green. The proposed fiscal year 23-24 expenditures are based on current year's budget with a CPI increase of 3.5% for M&O expenditures. This includes all negotiated salary increases and placeholders for bargaining groups, as well as pension cost increases as calculated per our CalPERS actuarial report. The proposed budget was developed with the current economic environment in mind. Due to the inflation we are currently experiencing, we included a 3.5% CPI increase on all M&O expenditures. This is on top of the 5% increase that was given in the current year. Fleet maintenance and replacement charges were also increased in the proposed budget to reflect the cost increases to vehicle purchases and fuel costs. It's important to note that we are continuously monitoring the status of the city's revenues and expenses, and if needed, as we did during the pandemic, we can cut back on expenses or initiate a hiring freeze to manage our costs. For the fiscal year 23-24 proposed general fund budget, we are recommending additions of about $600,000 for one-time items and $1.1 million for ongoing items. These additions will be funded from the previously noted $3.2 million projected surplus, resulting in a projected surplus of $1.5 million. One-time items staff recommends including are equipment purchases for city clerk, development services, and library, replacement of personal protective equipment for fire as required per state standards, additional funding for library and neighborhood services to continue their programming at John Landis Recreation Center, which is currently being funded by ARPA funds, additional funding for parks and recreation to support citywide activities such as concerts in the park, trunk or treat, tree lighting, and egg hunt. These activities have grown without increases to the Parks and Recreation operating budget. And funding for irrigation repairs for citywide parks and beaches. These one-time additions amount to approximately $600,000. Recommended ongoing M&O additions include annual software expenses for the city clerk's office, increases to communications, media, and advertising expenses for the city manager's office, equipment maintenance and software increases for development services. Some of these expenses would be offset by CIP funding, and increases for fire department contracts and increases for emergency medical supplies due to increased transportation volume for the fire department. Ongoing software costs resulting from new required accounting standards, as well as an increase to the ambulance billing contract due to increased transportation volume, is recommended for the Financial Services Department. The ambulance billing contract increases would be offset by ambulance billing revenue. An increase for the library's extra help expenses is recommended to streamline and improve the staffing process. And we are also recommending an increase for hourly personnel for parks and recreation programs and city events. Some of these costs would also be offset by class registration revenue. These ongoing M&O additions amount to approximately $430,000. Staff recommends adding the following positions to the fiscal year 23-24 budget. 2 code enforcement officers, which were formerly funded through CDBG. These are no longer allowable expenses for CDBG funding. 1 library assistant and 1 part-time professional assistant to continue library services at John Landis. These positions are currently being funded by ARPA. 1 administrative analyst position for the Neighborhood Services Department to help oversee the increasing number of housing-related programs and grants. And 1 police sergeant, which was previously overseeing police operations in the harbor, beach, and downtown areas. We're requesting that it be funded by general fund. This position was previously funded by harbor, and as a result of the recent shift in marine public safety responsibilities, it is now needed to be funded by the general fund. The total recommended ongoing cost increase due to new positions is about $676,000, making total recommended ongoing additions about $1.1 million. That concludes this presentation. Staff recommends that City Council direct staff to return on June 7th, 2023 for final budget adoption and include all recommendations outlined in the general fund budget for fiscal year 23-24. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions at this time from the dais? Councilmember Joyce.
I just had a question about, I think this is probably for Jonathan. I saw there's a specific allocation for Parks and Rec to put on special events around the city. I know that we also have neighborhood services that puts on a lot of events too. I've just heard that they've had some issues with finding enough funding to really do those events the right way, or a way that honors the event. So there's some maybe some not enough parity between those two event budgets. Has has your office been looking at that at all?
Honorable Mayor and council members, yes, I know that was a conversation that was had during our budget briefings, and the question or the concern was making sure that there was parity in terms of the special events budgets that are allocated to the Parks and Rec Department versus those that are allocated to neighborhood services. And we did find that we can add that money to the budget. It's about $25,000 in additional funding that would be needed to bring parity. And we do have the capacity to add that if we'd like to have parity between the two budgets so that the programs can be on equal footing, essentially, in terms of the resources that are available.
Is that like per event? Is that how that number came up?
It's actually a pot of money that they have, each department has, that they can use as they would like to support special events. So it's about $45,000 in total per department is what we would be looking at.
Oh, okay, the same, okay.
Right.
I got it, to
Exactly.
match.
Yeah, and they could use that money as they would like to support whatever events.
Awesome, okay. Well, I would definitely support that change.
Okay. Do we have any requests to speak from the public?
We have none on this item.
Okay, back to the council. And Councilmember Joyce, you are asking that that be included, that the $25,000, which is not very much. So did you want to have a motion? Direct staff to return?
Yes, is that how we do the motions up here? This is my first budget with you all. It's nice to be here.
Well,
Are we
it's
doing
under C
motions or
here.
is it under
There's
direction?
actually suggested language to use.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there'll be continued conversations in a second. So, but you're asking to add the $25,000.
Yep, I would make a motion to add the $25,000 and then pass the budget as.
Yeah, that seems pretty fair, so I would second that. Any other requests to speak? I know we've all been, had a chance to ask questions with basically each department, each of these categories. Councilmember Robinson?
Yeah, thank you. And I talked to Mr. Borrego, mentioned this in one of our regular meetings, and I just want to throw it out here, and I'm not sure if this is the right place to throw it out or not. So talking about neighborhood services, and when we went through the recent NOI process for the mobile home parks, and I don't know if we can do it in this budget, but at least thinking ahead, looking for a position that would help and really be a focus for our mobile home issues, because they are very complex. And what I'm finding out over the last few months, reading through all the ordinances and code, I think it would help maybe that particular population. So I'll just put it out there.
Yeah, and I think the way we've been able to do that is through the contract with the consultant, which is a legal consultant. And a lot of these are legal issues that seem to bubble up, especially with respect to the mobile residency law, which is state law, and then the city things. So what
I would say that, yes, as we go into the formal process, but every day, and I know you get the same emails I do, we're bombarded with different challenges dealing with our mobile home parks, and I don't know that we really have one good person that we can go to that understands, and maybe I'm wrong, that understands all the ins and outs of mobile home law, and we can just deal with.
Yeah, and I actually have, along with neighborhood services, is our affordable housing. Mr. Berger, we have had these conversations about what can we do to further advance our plan to meet the needs that we are, number one, being required to, but also that are definitely happening. We see a real need for affordable housing within our community, within our existing families. So is there something that we have to do to add to neighborhood services to be able to do that? I know that there is a position, I think, what is it, position and a half maybe, that are really addressed to maybe after-school programming, but if there is a need for that department to get help to be able to further along, affordable housing projects and things like that, if that's something because traditionally the housing neighborhood services has been funded through state and federal funds, right? And not really from the general fund. So, which to your point, Councilmember Robinson, these are things that are bubbling up, that are above and beyond what the current kind of makeup is able to, or seems to be able to address. It's just like there's just a lot of expertise has left, like 100 years worth, kind of thing. How do we get back to a level where we're really looking forward and really planning for the future?
Yeah, so Honorable Mayor and Council members, I have a few different thoughts on this. So, first of all, with regards to the staffing, as was just presented by Ms. Moya, as part of this budget, we are recommending the addition of one full-time position to neighborhood services, specifically to provide support to the housing division, because certainly that continues to be a focus and will continue to be a focus down the road, not only with just the sheer number of affordable housing projects that we're now getting, as density bonus projects. And I think sometimes we forget that each of those projects does also bring with it a staffing obligation, because we're then responsible for not only working with the developers to properly get those units in place, but also ongoing monitoring as well. So, of course, again, we are recommending the addition of one housing position. As you also alluded to, we did also through Measure X recently add a full-time position. Of course, that's provisional, because that position will go away at some point in time when Measure X goes away, and that position was specifically to support some of the additional at-risk youth programming that we're going to be stepping up through the Measure X funding. I would recommend at this point that we fill those two full-time positions and then revisit the issue in terms of adding additional staff. As part of next year's budget, I can certainly see there may be a need at that point to continue building on that staff, but I think just getting that staff hired and trained is going to be a lot, and I would suggest that we kind of stop at that point for the time being. As far as your other question goes with affordable housing, I do, and I have had this conversation with staff, I do believe that we probably need to have some sort of a council workshop to get some direction in terms of where the council would like us to proceed in the affordable housing arena, because there are different options out there, different types of programs. Of course, we have limited funding available, and so we could certainly benefit from having some council guidance in terms of what you would like to focus on moving forward with those limited resources. And so that is something that we would plan on bringing forward probably after your summer break to have that discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Joyce?
I just wanted to agree that we do have some very specific issues in our mobile home parks. Do we do a check-in in the fall on budgetary matters to see maybe, if funds are coming in well over what we projected, that we can do some staffing additions if we have additional funds?
Well, we typically do a mid-year budget review and adjustment, and so that usually happens later in the year. And so if revenues are coming in higher than projected, then certainly that's a conversation that we could have. And I do agree with Councilmember Robinson that, that the mobile home park issue is becoming a bigger an issue because of a lot of the dynamics that are going on in terms of the ownership of the parks and, some of the increases that the residents are facing out there. And I would agree that having a dedicated staff person assigned to the mobile home park issue would be a benefit at some point in time as well, assuming that we can find the resources to fund it.
Right.
Yeah, I think just to plus one that, if we put the money in and have somebody doing that proactive work, it really does save the back end headache and also the stress that the residents go through when they have these issues and can't get the answers that they need. So I would definitely be keeping a close eye on that. The other pieces I just wanted to bring up, I know that aren't included in this budget, but I think we need to have on our very close radar are the amount of infrastructure funding that's coming out of the federal government especially. There are grants just all over the place. And if we don't have people writing for these grants, the money just goes by, goes right to Carlsbad or San Clemente, or you choose it. So I would really like us to think as a council about how we be proactive in not only securing, but securing the long-term maintenance of grants that we secure. As I'm learning more about the municipal system, just getting the grant is just one of the steps. Obviously, making sure that you carry it out all the way through is a big ask as well, and it takes staffing too. So to that degree, like keeping an eye on the process of all these grants coming out and having specific people write for them is really important. And then the other gap that I don't have in our budget, but I think we should be, again, thinking about it closely, is an environmental planner specifically on our staff. And that is because there are so many, there are so many state and federal mandates that we have to work with within the environmental space, that having a specific person working on that, it's a full-time job. And then also to meet our own goals that we set for ourselves within our own environmental planning and future around our general plan update takes us so much staff mental time that we have so much work to do in that space. So I know they're not included, but I just wanted to make sure that were said in this moment. So thank you.
Yeah, and in fact, last night, I was having a conversation about the mobile home parks and how it's different. They primarily were family-owned, and now they're being bought off by corporations and then seemingly trying to create new legal entities, but it's the same entity. And so it's more difficult to trace what is actually happening. Things that our legal staff, our consultants, our employees have never seen before. So I think we had a taste of that at the last hearing, where it was real clear. It seemed to me, because I was listening, but I'm certainly not on the voting side of this. But it seemed to me that it was the same entity, just that you create like a management, with the same name, but it's got another identity. And having money go through there versus through the owners, and then somehow it becomes murky, so you don't know if that's money that you can count, end up counting in terms of the whether that should be included with the residents or as a payment against the residents. And it just seemed kind of more cloudy when it shouldn't be. It should be really the way we've done it in the past. These have been much easier hearings to have. So yeah, I agree that there are some things, and I say legally because it just seems like these entities are just creating. They're all the same organizations or legal organizations or agencies from different parks even. So it is very interesting. Councilmember Robinson.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing, because I kind of deferred said about the legality of mobile home. And I know to our city attorney and his staff, and I think Barbara Hamilton in particular is probably as a good expert as we need on those things. And I wasn't implying that we don't have folks that know the law. So just wanted to clarify that.
Right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second that is including the $25,000 kind of an equity situation, addressing an equity situation between two departments, or I think that was just two departments. All right, please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
Thank you. Item number 2 is utilities. That's non-CIP budget review. We've got report by Ms. Lindsay Leahy, our Water Utilities Director. Ms. Leahy?
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Lindsay Leahy, Water Utilities Director. Here today to present the proposed operating budget for the Water Utilities Department. Per usual, for the Utilities Department, we focus on maintaining our infrastructure, focus on sustainability, completing our projects that work towards our 50% local water supply goal by 2030, evaluating green and energy efficient options, as well as implementing state and federal mandates that come to the department. Some assumptions for the water and sewer budget that are proposed in today's budget for next fiscal year. There's a $2 million operational increase for the Pure Water Oceanside facility from last fiscal year. And this is due to on-ramping the facility and operating it fully at this time. We've included additional vehicles, and we've seen some large increases in energy and chemical costs on both water and wastewater treatment. The proposed budget includes 3 position additions. There's a full-time or 100% funded by water in the management analyst for a data analysis role. 100% funded by sewer for a management analyst specifically for compliance, and this is specific for our sewer and wastewater treatment compliance and aligning with any of our permits for our facilities, as well as a asset management coordinator that is funded 50% by water and 50% by sewer. And this would be focusing as an intermediary between capital projects and our operations staff, and really focusing on scheduling equipment replacements, smaller projects, and maintaining the assets that we have invested in. The proposed budget includes 2 position reclassifications. Both have a 50-50 split between water and sewer. And they also include any planned increases from Metropolitan Water District, San Diego County Water Authority, and any proposed increases for the City of Oceanside. The water and recycled water operating budget estimates to see about just under $80 million in revenue next fiscal year, with total expenditures being just under $73 million. We propose to transfer about $6.5 million to capital to fund some of the capital programming, with a net balance of $284,000 for next fiscal year. For the sewer fund, we estimate $51 million in revenues with total expenses of $34 million and transferring $10.7 million to capital with a remaining $6.3 million in fund balance. And that fund balance is going to be used for some of our big capital programming in future years. So that's going to be expended eventually. For the solid waste and recycling budget, the assumptions include the transfer of billing services from the City of Oceanside to Waste Management. So as of April of this year, Waste Management the city is no longer billing for solid waste services. And beginning May of 2023, Waste Management will begin that. So there's a big decrease in revenues and an equal decrease in expenditures as we're no longer sending those funds to Waste Management. However, it does include the proposed CPI increases from Waste Management as of July of 2023 at 8% increase. It also includes the projected revenues from the upcoming 2024 Waste Management franchise agreement and the continued efforts to maintain or obtain grant funding to support some of the state and federal programs and some of our operational programs within the department. The expected revenues for the solid waste and recycling division is $9.7 million with essentially equal expenditures at $9.7 million with an estimated delta of $1,000 remaining in the budget. And with that, staff is recommending that the City Council direct staff to return on June 7th, 2023 for final budget adoption of the proposed water utilities operating budget. and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Any initial questions from the dais? I see no lights. Do we have any requests to speak from the public?
We do not.
Okay, back to the dais. Any questions, a motion? Okay, there's a motion and a second. My only comment is you guys are doing great. I love what water is doing, and especially the CIP, which I know you're going to be talking about later. But the one thing that I mentioned during our meeting is that when the billing is transferred to waste management, that there be some kind of a link to waste management, basically saying you are leaving the City of Oceanside site, but to remind people that there are two separate bills, so they don't somehow get cut off on their pickup. So that would be my request, that you make sure that that happens. For people like me who forget to when is that happening? It's happening actually next month, right?
That is correct. So thank you, Mayor Sanchez, City Council. I have been working with our finance department and our billing department. Those changes are being added to both the PayLink site as well as the email. If you get electronic notifications that your bill is coming out, there will be a notification that says that billing for solid waste services will be through Waste Management with a link to their page. At this time, we're proposing to keep that on the system until July, which would give customers 3 months to transition to the new billing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There's a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
All right, now we have item number 3, which is the capital improvement projects budget overview. And this report is by Mr. Brian Thomas, our city engineer, and Mabel Uyeda, water utilities principal engineer. Well, it gives Mabel a chance to walk down the aisle. There you go.
Can you add slides? I don't think there's enough.
I didn't see it. He's an engineer.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Brian Thomas, City Engineer. With me tonight or today is Mabel Ueda, our Principal Water Engineer, and together we will be presenting the combined capital improvement program budget, after which both she and I will be available to address any questions or concerns. The capital improvement program budget is comprised of several different accounts, funded through grants from the county, state, and federal government, taxes, including gas tax, Transnet, SB1, and Measure X, development impact fees, including thoroughfares and signals, and citywide drainage, our enterprise funds, which include parks, harbor, water, and sewer, and our general funds. The proposed budget for this current fiscal year is just under $159 million. This slide shows our breakdown of each fund. Next one. Our development impact fees. Currently, development is holding steady, but many developments are now requesting fee deferrals to future years as a result of interest rates increase and higher than anticipated inflation. Fee deferral impacts current year budget forecasts, but offer an increase to collected fees in the future years. Fee deferrals do not lock in the fees. And by that, I mean all fees must be paid based on trigger items such as issuing of building permits, permanent or temporary certificates of occupancy. And these fees are based on what the fee structure is in place at the time they actually request them to be paid, not when the deferral is allowed. However, the DIF fund balances remain healthy enough to continue with city projects for the next 3 to 4 years, with the exception of the drainage fund, which requires a master plan update and fee revision to fund future projects, and the public facilities fee, which is insufficient for upcoming projects impacted by the growth of the city. A comprehensive fee study will soon be commissioned to address these deficiencies, as well as exploring the prospect of instituting other fees related to drainage improvements along the San Luis River, the Loma Alta and Buena Vista Creeks, and our oceanfront developments. Currently, our developer impact fee comprises approximately 30% of our revenue needed for new projects, with the balance coming from general fund allocations. If development decreases, the amount available through DIF also decreases, which relies more on general fund to cover the cost of the projects. Our pavement management program is made up of several different accounts, including Measure X, SB1, and Transnet for street rehabilitation. In an effort to repair the excessive number of potholes that have developed with the recent heavy rains this year, staff is recommending diverting some of the maintenance budget programs for slurry seal of residential streets to repairing the increased number of potholes. Staff is further recommending the balance of the slurry seal funds be equally distributed amongst the 4 council districts. In a further effort to address arterial and collector road deterioration, staff is also recommending the overlay funds be programmed to these efforts. Staff will continue to evaluate residential streets that require major rehabilitation. Lastly, staff has solicited proposals for a new pavement management program to update the one that was performed in 2013. The pavement management program will reevaluate all the roads in the city to help direct future repairs and slurry seal efforts. A staff report and a contract will be coming later in June for that. Staff has some recommended projects, excuse me, and one of them that was a late add would be allocation of a $20,000 fee to conduct a feasibility study to discuss the merits of a crossing down at Buena Vista Lagoon at the Audubon Society to allow the volunteers to get from the east side of Coast Highway to the south side safely. So that does not show up in the slide presentation, but staff is making that recommendation for this year. We have various funds that we are requesting various projects through. For instance, 501, we're recommending that the downtown streetlight replacement phase 3 be allocated. In Fund 503, we have several projects, including the lifeguard headquarters at the harbor, the Civic Center elevator controller board, Mission Branch library remodel, library facility items, main library signage, fire admin remodel, and Fire Station 8 construction. From our thoroughfare and signals program, we're looking at several traffic signals to be installed throughout the area, including Rancho del Oro and Mesa, Cary and Canyon. We're also recommending additional funds to repair the various traffic signal conduits throughout the city, as well as do an assessment of the fiber optic signal throughout the city to connect all the signals to the traffic management center. Out of our Parks Fund, we're asking for various projects to be approved as well, including the Lake Park Restroom and Snack Bar and Gazebo roof replacement, Park and Rec Center roof replacements, Balderrama Center improvements for both the interior and exterior, and the dance floor improvements at the El Corazon Senior Center. We're also recommending that some improvements to the roofing be done at the Municipal Golf Course Clubhouse, and we're requesting funding in the amount of $2.5 million to begin the design assessment for both gyms at Balderrama Center and John Landis Park. We've provided the unfunded future CIP projects in the CIP memo included in your budget book. We are available to address specific questions regarding the unfunded program. At this time, I'd like to turn the process over to Mabel, and we'll both be available at the end for questions.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor Sanchez and City Council members. My name is Mabel Ueda. I'm Principal Water Engineer for Water Utilities, and I'll be presenting the Water Utilities Proposed Capital Improvement Program Budget for fiscal year 23-24. The capital improvement project expenditures are made up of 4 funds. 2 are for water, 2 are for sewer, totaling $75.6 million. You'll notice sewer is a little bit higher as we start to ramp down on our recycled water and water projects and ramp up on our sewer improvement infrastructures. I'll start off with water and recycled water projects. Projects of interest, there's 11 listed here. They include our recycled water projects as well as our AMI. Those are some new infrastructure. The rest of them are primarily replacement of aging infrastructure. Overall, for projects that have been completed and under construction as well as in design, the total construction cost so far is $191 million. We are continually seeking grant and funding for our capital costs to offset those to our ratepayers. So those are we've obtained approximately $28 million for our projects as in grant funding, and are in pursuit of additional $12 million that we anticipate to receive this year, as well as some additional state and federal funding for our project. Once all of our capital improvement projects have been completed, we will achieve 44% of our local water supply. We continue to meet our strategic goals for our water and recycled water projects by completing our lower phase 1 recycled water system expansion, as well as our pure water Oceanside projects, and improving the reliability of our critical infrastructure. Now on to our sewer projects. There's approximately 15 projects of interest listed here. A good number of those projects include the facilities that we'll need to construct in order to decommission our La Salina wastewater treatment plant so that we can centralize our flows at San Luis Rey. And then the rest of those projects are to replace aging infrastructure. Similar to water, the total completed projects, as well as those in construction and design, construction cost is approximately $190 million. You'll notice that right now we're heavy in the design so that we are going to be ramping up in the construction of the sewer infrastructure improvements. We currently have a few projects that are in development. One of them includes our sewer master plan and asset management plan that will go in tandem with our water master plan, and that will help us to identify additional infrastructure as a result of capacity growth, population growth, as well as aging infrastructure information that we'll identify in the field. For sewer projects, we are also aggressively pursuing additional funding opportunities. The following listed are our funding that we have so far for our projects. And we continue to meet our strategic goals for sewer improvements by centralizing our wastewater flows at our San Luis Rey water reclamation facility and replacing our aging infrastructures, some of the lift station at Pilgrim Creek and Oceanside Boulevard, to name a couple. Staff recommends that the City Council direct staff to return on June 7th for final budget adoption and include all recommendations outlined in the proposed capital improvement projects budget for fiscal year 23-24. Available for any questions.
Thank you, Mabel.
You're welcome.
So any initial questions, Councilmember Weiss?
Yes, and I don't need an answer right now, and I'll direct these at Brian and kind of at Hamid as well. With the street slurry and overlay projects, I had gotten some concerns from residents on Moonstone Bay Drive, so you can just follow up with me outside of here of whether that Moonstone Bay is included in one of the next year or two's projects. And the other one, similarly, with all of the rains we've had, there seems to be a lot of weeds in the medians, and I know that's more of a maintenance issue, but I just want to make sure that if we need to go out and spray or do whatever we need to do, that's taken care of.
Will do.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any requests to speak for the public?
Yes, we do. We have one request to speak from Natalie Shapiro.
Thank you. Ms. Shapiro from the Buena Vista Audubon Society.
Hi, thank you, Mayor and Council. And I was going to speak this afternoon to promote the crosswalk, but it looks like I was not expecting that it's in the budget. So I want to thank Council, Mayor, and staff for doing that. That's a wonderful surprise. So I'm not going to make a pitch. I'm just going to say thank you. And we'll just keep in touch about the next steps. Sounds like a good plan. So,
Brian, is it included, or did you say that this can be included?
from what it sounded like it's in the budget for planning, if I heard correctly.
Honorable Mayor, City Council Member.
I don't hear really well, so I may have misheard.
No, that's okay. We've added, it was a late add to the recommended
That's what you
projects
said.
for this year.
So it is included.
So it would be included if
Great.
council agrees to it.
Fantastic. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, everybody. Much appreciated.
Thank you. No other requests? Okay. Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. Brian, what do we get for 20 grand on a crossing? What is that? Is that just a crosswalk?
Well, the 20 grand is going to look at sight distance, speed safety. We also need to look at where the best placement of the crossing would be. One of the things we'd be looking to install would be rapid flashing beacons. And because this particular area does flood out, we need to make sure that we approach it thoughtfully and carefully and don't short it out every time it floods down there. We want to keep the electricity out of the facilities. So we have to look and see where best to put it, one that's convenient for the volunteers to use to cross, and one that also meets sight distance.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to thank you for putting that extra effort into the pavement. It's one of the biggest concerns and complaints that I hear from people, and it's we got a lot of things to fix it immediately, and I appreciate you guys putting that effort into that. And one last thing, just not so much for this budget, but an idea or for consideration later, we can talk about it, is I think it was $100,000 in repairs for the Muni Golf Course snack bar. Did I get that right?
That's
Clubhouse.
correct.
Oh, the clubhouse, not
It's
the.
clubhouse. That's just to replace some things now. In future years, we're asking for additional money to do structural repairs to it.
Okay, I would just,
Not in this budget, but I think in '26.
maybe we look a little bigger vision as how we can use that space better for event space, things like that. I think it's a great location that to expand that use. So I just throw that out there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Joyce.
So I just want to apologize to staff because I had a meeting after our CIP meeting, so this is new, and but it's not new to, I think, everybody's ears. We had a very well-attended council meeting recently by some of the Oceanside American Little League parents, and they've been working with our staff to figure out how best to do the dog park that's going to be right beside their fields. But in an attempt to go and find out more about their facility needs, I toured the facility and found some really concerning pieces to it. So I would request from my council members that we add money into this year's budget to address some of those needs, like the bathroom and snack bar, which are not usable. The facility under the junior sale field bleachers is where they keep all of the kids' stuff, and there were leaks, and there's some really major issues that we have a group of children using this space right now that really needs some attention. So I would ask if we can, this has a ending fund balance of 2.5 million, I think, if I recall, from the Parks Fund. If we could dedicate 500,000 of that to this space, I would really appreciate it. And I know that the kids there would too. So I guess thoughts from my fellow council?
Yeah, I agree that it's an ongoing, the dog park and the, working together to coordinate both activities at the same time. I definitely want to make sure that they are both fully able to be done. So, yeah, I haven't been out there, but I did see the pictures, and of course, I've been there a lot of times but when they said, well, these are certain areas that we use to make sure that the dogs stay completely, that there's some kind of a buffer to make sure that the balls and the dogs, it's not something that's going to be mixing and creating problems. Councilmember Weiss?
I don't disagree with Councilmember Joyce's issue about taking a look at what needs to be done for the existing restrooms and the bleachers and whatnot. I would just caution, and I'm fine with you coming back, or Mr. Borrego coming back with the final budget adoption with a recommendation. I would just caution that I don't think we can use park fees, development impact fees, to do maintenance and repair. So if there's other funding sources out there, I'd be happy to look at that, because we should probably look at what needs to be done if those restrooms are in a condition that it can't be used. So with that, I'll move approval of staff recommendation.
There's a motion and a second. As to the crossing that we are including for the Buena Vista Lagoon, the 3 acres that are under the jurisdiction of the Audubon Society, the Buena Vista Audubon Society, we understand, and the information we've received is that, first of all, this is a new activity that's happening. That is that the 3 acres that are under the jurisdiction of the Buena Vista Audubon Society is moving faster than, say, the total project. That the total project, restoration project, does somehow contemplate fixes to the street that actually floods at this time, right? So the EIR, I believe, studied that. So what can we do in the meantime to make it safe, because we are seeing more pedestrian activity, and there is speeding that happens in there. And so the conversations were, well, let's try to do signage and try to do it on both sides. And staff's put a point that since it does flood, to make sure that there are no electricals that are nearby. So looking to do some of these improvements, or the crossing at a higher level, a higher grade up the street, not too far, so that it isn't used. Instead, we still continue to see some kind of crossing the street where there is no sidewalk, but trying to make it safe. So I don't know, 20,000 seems like a very small, but I'm sure that as this moves along, we'll be seeing some information from staff, like what else we could do, and certainly apply for grants, because I think this is something that we could qualify for grants. So I'm really, really happy that staff has included this, and to ensure, and basically this is a long-term, short-term need to slow down that traffic, especially since on the Carlsbad side, we're seeing so many accidents with serious injuries on the other side. So
And honorable mayor and council members, and just to be clear, and I think that this was the point that Brian was trying to make in response to Councilmember Robinson's question. The $20,000 is just to do a site analysis.
Right.
It's not to do the physical improvements. Those physical improvements, assuming that we can design a safe crossing there. And there are challenges because of the topography and line of sight's actually pretty good, but the topography, if nothing else, because of the downhill there and the width of the street, of course. But the $20,000 will allow us to do the analysis and then come back with the design. So we would likely be coming back to you in the future, assuming there is a feasible design to secure the funding for construction. And to your point, if there's grant funding out there, we could certainly
Right.
pursue that as well.
And then even narrowing it down to where there is, where that activity would be happening anyway, just so that as the cars are approaching, they are in fact slowing down versus speeding up. But yeah, so happy about that. And anything you could do to add money to fixing our roads. I know we've had a really big difference in weather, and the water did a lot of damage, and usually $2 million a year is just barely enough to make a dent, right? And so now we have even a bigger challenge. So anything that we could do to try to get more grants and dollars to fix our streets, and our sidewalks, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So we do have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Councilmember? Motion approved, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next is item number 4, which is our harbor budget overview. And we have a report by Mr. Hamid Bahadouri, Public Works Director.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council. Hamid Bahadouri, Public Works Director. I'm here to present the proposed budget for the Harbor Division. This budget, as you know, is prepared with the information available today, and we are working on a harbor financial study that you have been briefed and is work in progress, and hopefully we will come back to you later this year or early next year, hopefully later this year, and these numbers may change depending on the recommendations and what might be approved. But as of now, these are the numbers for the harbor that's what we forecast in the coming fiscal year. These numbers have been reviewed by the Harbor Beaches Advisory Committee in their meeting on April 17, and they have also made recommendation to you to approve the proposed budget. The harbor revenues, basically the main source of revenue is the slip rentals, which we are estimating to be at about $6 million, including the proposed adjusted CPI of 6.5% that will become effective January 1st, 2024. That's the automatic CPI adjustment that slip rentals go through every other year on biannual basis. The harbor facility leases is about $1.6 million. Parking revenues are, we estimate, about $995,000. These are the share of the parking revenue that remain in the harbor budget. About half of that, about $300,000 to $500,000 of the parking revenue. In addition to this, is generated in harbor, which is deposited into city's general fund. Fees are about $277,000. Inspections and miscellaneous are $16,000, and the investment income is a nominal amount of $15,000. The expenditures, the primary expenditures, are about $3 million worth of maintenance. About 2/3 of that is for internal staff salaries and costs, and about 1/3 of $3 million, a little bit more than a third, $1.3 million of that is for contracts with outside firms. Lifeguard patrol has two components, a $2.6 million component, excuse me, which is for the patrol, which now, as you know, as of last February, the transition was made from PD to the lifeguard. And then lifeguard also has about the $296,000. That's for the beach lifeguard activities. Administration is staffing salary mostly at $1.2 million, $1.289 million. And there is a lease agreement between the harbor and the city going back to 1964, 63, The last time it was executed was in 2003, amended in 2009, and it has a provision of $250,000 minimum rent or 10% of the gross revenue, and whichever is greater. And 10% of gross revenue is estimated to be $844,000. The property management, the city charges the harbor a very nominal fee for managing the commercial leases we have in that area. And that's $38,000 staff salary. Depreciation is about $474,000. Debt service is $131,000. This is the last year that this number is so high. These are debt services payback for the money that was borrowed from general fund. Next year, it will be substantially less. And miscellaneous is $108,000. You may notice that this is an increase, substantial increase percentage-wise compared to last year. It's mostly for the risk management and the insurance premium that have gone up. Good news is that this year, we are hoping that these numbers are going to hold through. We are showing some savings, $24,000 about, that will be going to the harbor reserve. The CIPs on the harbor, nothing new this year. It's pretty much carryover of projects from last year, which is the infrastructure repairs and dock approaches and gates. The harbor fishing pier, that's a $400,000 project. That's a design permitting project. 35% plans will be submitted this week or early next week. The Jolly Roger dock replacement, that's a design build project by Bellingham. That's still in an infancy period. J-dock replacement has been completed. We closed the book. And that project had about $500,000, $475,000 extra surplus that will be deposited back to the harbor reserve. With this, we would like to recommend that you direct us to come back on June 7th for final budget adoption and include all recommendations outlined in the proposed harbor operating fiscal improvement project budget and any additions that you may recommend in your meeting today. With that, I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any requests to speak from the public?
We do not have any.
Okay, to the council. Councilmember Weiss.
Yeah, I have a question. So you have, on the good news, you have $24,000 a year excess revenues to expenditures.
From J-Dock project.
Yeah, what you said, your harbor revenues were almost, you have about $24,000 that's going into savings.
Yes, again, $24,000, and again, bear in mind that these are projections, both revenue and
I get it.
expenditure.
But with only $24,000 going into savings, if you had an unanticipated need to replace a dock for $2.5 million, it would take you 100 years to raise the money based on that savings.
Well, that is very true, and the harbor budget, as you know better than I do, has been operating at a balance, zero balance, revenue and expenditures matching. That is not the best way to run that enterprise account, and we are hoping that as part of the financial study, we will come up with a financial proposal that will allow for more saving and a faster buildup of reserves in the harbor in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Move approval, staff recommendation.
There's a motion and a second for approving staff's recommendation. I do want to thank staff for working with the Harbor and Beaches Advisory Committee. They currently have an ad hoc committee that they are looking towards at ways to raise revenue. I appreciate the staff is looking at different ways, including metering for water and electric, perhaps charging higher rates for non-residents and, et cetera. There's like a whole list of things that would really be nice, a really not very difficult for the slip owners, say, and probably have a lower increase for slip owners. So I'm really thankful that staff is working with the residents and with the users of the harbor in getting something that would be equitable and something that would increase the revenues for the harbor. Thank you. Motion and second, please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
Thank you. Item number 5 is Measure X budget overview, and we have a report from Assistant City Manager Michael Gossman. Mr. Gossman? came in right on time. I saw you come in. It's like,
Well, I have a very lengthy presentation here, so I didn't want to waste any time. This should take no more than an hour, hour and a half, but I'll do my best to speed that along.
we're all your captive audience. Yeah, I see that.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. As you said, Michael Gossman, Assistant City Manager, and I'm just here to give you a brief overview of the proposed Year 5 spending plan for the Measure X sales tax. So the spending plan before you today was reviewed by the Citizens Oversight Committee on March 9th, 2023. It was recommended for approval by the council. This plan includes continuation of all prior approved programs and projects, as well as one new program that I'll talk to you about in a second. Total revenues for Year 5 are budgeted at about $20 million. This includes net revenue, new taxes of $18.15 million, and then some carryover from prior years that we use to keep the programs going. Total revenues over the life of Measure X are projected to be at $153,000 over costs of all projects. These funds can be used in future years to cover capital costs or expand Measure X program funding. Now, one caveat I'd like to add to that is the $153,000 represents what the estimates were for Year 4, that is the year we're in now, when the plan was developed. Since then, I've taken another look at those revenues and expenditures, and I estimate now that we will actually end Measure X with about $2.2 million over what the expenses are. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So a comparison between the Year 4 plan and the Year 5 plan, very little was changed between the two, so they're roughly similar. You see less in the capital improvement area in Year 5, simply because we've fully funded the fire station. In fact, we got a grant, so I've reduced the amount of Measure X needed by $1 million for Fire Station 1. Street and road repairs improvements went down, but that's a result of completion of capital projects. And then beachfront pier parks and beaches went up. That recognizes an additional amount set aside for the eventual replacement of the Pier View Bridge. So with the revenue that we anticipate for Year 5, we estimate a carryover of $1.8 million into Year 6. So ongoing projects that you're probably well familiar with, homeless outreach team, contract sobering services, homeless hiring program, which we're actually have been unsuccessful in getting a contractor to come in. So we're reallocating those funds to other homeless programs. The Enhanced Emergency Services Delivery Model, or the EMT program, construction of Fire Station 1, the South Strand Rehabilitation Project. I won't read the entire list to you, but things that we've added recently include the Medic Squad, the Community Services Officer Program, youth programming and gang prevention, and then this traffic calming program as well. I mentioned that we did add one new project in Year 5, and that is the additional of an EMT pay and retention incentive program. What this means is $400,000. It's $1,500 stipends for EMTs to attend the fire academy, 6 $8,000 stipends for EMTs to attend medic school, an increase in pay for EMTs by $3 an hour, and it allows EMTs to complete paramedic internships as paid employees. The purpose of this program is, A, to be more competitive with our neighboring agencies that have copied the city of Oceanside's good work in creating these EMT programs. They're able to pay more, therefore recruit away potential EMTs from our city. But also a main driving reason behind the EMT program was to create a pipeline for firefighters, paramedics. So by creating these incentives, it keeps people engaged, it keeps people loyal, and it eventually allows us to bring up EMTs into the firefighter paramedic rank. I think the real takeaway from the preliminary 7-year expenditure plan is that we have enough revenues to cover the expenses associated with Measure X that we have ongoing. As I'd mentioned, we have that $153,000 number has actually come up to $2.2 million, but that is where we are today. Regarding the $2.2 million, I would say that there really you have three options when we're looking at that. One is we could leave that as status quo. The money rides. It could allow Measure X programming to be extended into future years if the sales tax measure isn't renewed after year 7. 2, you could sink that into the Pier View Bridge or some other capital project that is the Pier View Bridge is the one project that is not really fully funded by Measure X. We've set aside $14 million. That project is probably going to be north of $20 million, but we also are optimistic that we'll be able to secure grant funding or earmark funding to help us complete that because it is historical. It is a big component of the entire coast, and it's a bridge, so it's infrastructure. The third option would be to expand programming, to direct staff today to come back with expanded options and projects, which we would have to go to the KOCT with. So I'm just throwing that out there because the numbers did change from what we'd originally presented to the KOCT. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm here to answer questions. This is a multi-department effort, so any of our department heads can answer questions if you have something specific for them as well.
Thank you. Any requests to speak from the public?
Yes, we do. We have one speaker, Colleen O'Hara.
Mayor and council members, I am Colleen O'Hara, and I am the chair of the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure X. And I thank you for that opportunity to serve my community. 4 years ago, the voters in Oceanside did themselves a favor by passing this half-cent sales tax. And I think you've seen through all of the presentations you've had today, the wonderful things that we have been able to accomplish using Measure X funds. Our job as the Oversight Committee is simply to take a look at the projects that come to us from staff, make sure that they comply with all of the provisions of Measure X, and make a recommendation to this council. We recently reviewed the 5-year plan and are recommending unanimously that the City Council adopt the plan as presented to you. I would also like you to consider extending this tax. It will expire at the end of the 5th year. We may have some funds left over we can still use. But as you can see, the needs that we are addressing in the community with Measure X are not going to go away. And the members of our community have greatly benefited by taxing themselves with this half-cent sales tax. So I would encourage you to put it on your agenda sometime and put it back on the ballot to have the measure extended. I will support you in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hara, for your service. No other requests to speak then, right? No. The Pier View Bridge is so critical and is becoming critical by the day. I had heard it more at 27 million, but I've also heard that our congressional representative has this on a high priority, as well as our state representative. So I really feel we need to expedite this project. I know that we have a larger project, but that is just going to slow us down. So I really would like to see this expedited, and if the other competing interests are not as critical as, say, the bridge, then I would really like to see the $2.2 million added to ensuring that we can move that quickly on the bridge. I know that there have been some studies where we're simply replacing with some changes, right, which we've been looking at for a bit, but to not have it shovel ready this year which was a great opportunity to be able to have funding, federal and state funding, it's a lost opportunity for me to see that, because I know Congressman Levin. He keeps asking about this. He really wants to see this happen. So, Councilmember Weiss?
A question for either Mr. Gossman or Mr. Borrego. As former Councilmember O'Hara mentioned, so when does the current Measure X expire?
April 2026.
Is there a thought of what we're going to do in regards to, do we go to the voters? Do we not go to the voters? Do we hope and wish, or?
Well, ultimately that, Councilmember Weiss, ultimately that decision lies with council. Staff's plan is to bring to council after working with a consultant this summer, coming to council either late in this year or early in 2024 to have that question posed to you to decide. Then we would take it from there to make sure that it was on the ballot. But my plan is to bring that question to you in late 2023 or early 2024.
So would the target be the 2024 election or 2026? Because if you shoot for 2026,
Councilmember Weiss, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it has to be on November of 2024 if it's going to go. It has to be on a general election because this is a general tax. So your last opportunity is November of 2024.
Thank you.
And I would add that we've been having several conversations recently, and our goal would be to actually get it to you this year for the questions so that we can ramp up to get the measure on the ballot.
Thank you. With that, I'll move staff recommendation.
Thank you. Councilmember Joyce?
I have a little bit of a different angle. First of all, that presentation was wonderful. It did highlight some really important, vital expenditures within the city. I really appreciate the EMT retention and the idea of creating the pipelines. Both that and the CSO programs create pipelines into our really necessary systems. I had a couple of ideas that if we funded them for the next 3 years, would get close to expending that additional funds that are there. And the reason I bring this up is this was a tax that was proposed, and we are, I think we are responsible to expend it within the years that we have it. I know that we can go beyond the 7, but I think we should plan to expend it within the 7. I think that is the responsible thing to do. So I would ask for your consideration on a couple of different ideas that are Measure X related, and I'd like to hear my feedback from my colleagues. The first one would be to add specific safe school and park zones. We have traffic calming money set aside that generally goes into the neighborhoods. It, from my understanding, has a pretty strict adherence to what you have to accomplish, what has to be happening with traffic for you to get funds in traffic calming. A lot of these wouldn't occur around a lot of our park zones and some of our school zones because it's either not long enough of a road or there's not enough cars at a certain time, or for whatever reason it doesn't qualify under our current rules. I would ask the council to consider adding $200,000 to our annual budget for creating safer school and park zones. I have 3 more, but I was going to see if there's feedback on that or adding that into this budget. Again, the $200,000 over the course of 3 years would be.
I do have a question, Mr. Gossman.
Yeah.
There was $650,000 that was approved ending this fiscal year, June 30th, for the youth programming, and I understand they're only going to be using about half of that. Is that calculated in your recommendation? It is already calculated.
Correct, Madam Mayor. It is calculated in. So the way that the Measure X is set up is that any funds in the ongoing programs that aren't spent, if we're under
It's
budget,
rolled over.
we roll it over.
Right. So you have already rolled those over. I know that there are a couple of other things that they're thinking of doing before June 30th.
Yeah.
So maybe not the entire half will be not used.
I'm not, Madam Mayor, I'm not taking any money away or any appropriations. I'm just speculating as to what they're actually going to spend, but I'm not reducing or recommending any reduction in appropriations. If they were able to expend those and get that program up and running, that would be fantastic. This is in no way taking
Right.
away. Yeah.
Right, and the reason why I asked is if it wasn't programmed in, there would be about 200,000 that would be able to be rolled over and perhaps
Is that part of the 2.2 million?
to the point of Councilmember Joyce.
Correct. The 2.2 comes from the estimated, it includes, it's really three places. That particular place, is actually the smallest place. The largest place is the CSO program, what positions we filled and how many we've forecast filling for the rest of the year. That's where the bulwark of that 2.2 million comes from. Again, we are not at all recommending that we reduce that program. It's simply realizing the fact that it's unspent and it's going to be rolled over anyway.
Right.
The other one is the Medic Squad program. Again, not taking away from the Medic Squad program, just recognizing that they're on a slower spend rate than we'd forecasted because they need to get it ramped up and running. Those are the two largest places that make up the amount from the youth programming and gang diversion. If that was to be fully expended, and I could find another area of savings within here to bring it up to 2.2. I'm not sweating that particular piece of it, yeah.
So I guess it would be your priorities. You said you have 3 or 4?
I have 4. They would add up to about 700,000 total. That would come out to about 2.1 million over 3 years.
How about half of that?
Well, you can tell me what you think is supportive. I can give you the other ideas, and then you just tell me what you think works. So, I mean, you could do half of that and do 100K for safe school and park zones. I just think we have lots of parks that could use additional expenditures around traffic calming. So the second one would be to fund a homeless services support position. How many people do we currently have working directly in our homeless support positions?
I would need some help from directors to actually put a number on that, because sometimes it's hard to say that there's, I work with homeless, we work with homeless people in a lot of different capacities. So to add that up, but I would say we have 4 police officers, 1 sergeant, 2 social workers that are contracted but still work with us full time. We've got Sal, who as part of his, this is another one why it makes it complicated. Sal spends a significant amount of time working on homeless issues, but he has other responsibilities too.
Yeah. So I bring that one forward because it is the number one thing that comes up in survey after survey about where we could be doing better. And a staff member specifically in that department looking at working with that population and trying to better connect people to services. I estimated at 100K. That was my, 5-6 teacher brain guessing that'd come out to about that. And I guess this would be somebody who would work under Sal, I guess, if they're an employee of our city. So that's the second one. The third one is increasing the youth development and gang diversion program to an even million, because again, that is a space where we are relieving pressure on the downward effects of not having our youth highly involved. And I think we could improve our offering of intensive, consistent mentors, which really do the gang diversion work. Similar to a school system that we have, which is called TC, and transformational consulting in the schools. And they are like a Swiss Army knife of supports. I think there's a justification to add that funding into the community programs and youth gang diversion. And then the last one would be a community grant program. And this one's a little bit different. It would essentially have, give each council member and the mayor the ability to allocate $50,000 in community grants in our city. And the reason for this is that I think getting the money closest to the people who are providing the services, whether it be through nonprofits or local public good entities. I know that you all know your neighborhoods the best, and this would mirror a program they kind of do at the county and some other cities. And so I think that'd be a really smart way for us to invest in the public safety on the proactive end. So those are my proposals for kind of the extra, and I'm sorry, this is kind of out of our normal range. First time. Ask for forgiveness. Any thoughts on those proposals or questions for me?
You know, in terms of the anti-gang initiative, the recommendation is for $800,000 for the following year, and I think that probably could include all of that, because having done it for the whole year, and what they have so far done is look towards gaps from partners because of the reluctance to hire anyone through this. You know, in other words, doing it like a contract-based thing. I would like to see more, because I think that is not sufficient. But having said that, they were only able to, as indicated, spend half.
Yeah, and we have that
So-
new staff member coming on too that's going to help work this out too.
Right. But I think that there is enough there. My concern is that if we do not expedite, find ways to expedite the peer view bridge, it is going to cost more and more. It's going to go over 27 million, and they have to come from somewhere. So I think that the community grant program sounds wonderful, but it's something that that would be, you know, it's something that we do have some critical necessities. I don't know if I could support that. The anti-gang initiative, I don't know, maybe we can add another 100,000 to that budget for these kind of things. But understanding that if this is, you know, the city will not be hiring people, it would be through contract. Who would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have to push back a little bit on us not hiring. We are hiring CSOs, we are hiring hot teams, we are hiring EMTs. We hire in all the other sectors for Measure X, but we don't hire for our youth programs. Like, I think we could justify doing that if we're going to do this over a 3-year period. It's not like we're going to leave anyone high and dry in 3 years.
Councilmember Weiss.
Thank you. Honestly, I'm uncomfortable just making a decision based on just the presentation here and negotiating. Is it 200,000 or is it 86,342? I have no problem. I mean, the budget's not coming back to us until June 7th. I have no problem in asking staff to evaluate the 4 projects, if you will, that you have. And I mean, not waiting until June 7th, but evaluating and give us a memo so that we can have an ability to make some recommendations. But I did hear, Mr. Gossman, you say if we add or change anything, we have to go back to the COC. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When is their next meeting?
There's no scheduled meeting until December, but we have called ad hoc meetings in the past. We did one in September. I'm more than happy to call another COC. It takes time. It's not on their calendars. I would probably be able to get to them in June or July, and then I would come back to council a couple weeks to a month later.
Okay, well, however it makes sense for you to do that, but I would prefer to get some kind of memo from the manager's office, at least outlining, get together with Councilmember Joyce outlining, you know, because my definition of what a safe school park zone may be different than what his is, and at least figuring out what he means by these and doing an assessment and come and make a recommendation to us.
We would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. I'll agree with Councilmember Weiss. I just would comment on the homeless support positions and that discussion. Man, we got places all over this city where we try to get, you know, private groups, nonprofits. Sometimes I wonder how much more can we do to repeat what everybody else is doing and why the city would want to pick that up. But I just kind of a little feedback for you. But the other things, I'm definitely interested in seeing some numbers. So thank you.
Councilmember Keim, Deputy Mayor Keim.
First, I want to
commend Councilmember Joyce. I can tell he's really trying to get this Measure X money to the citizens and actually make an impact. And as we hash this out up here, I think we're all concerned about making sure we get the most bang for our buck, and whether it's safe school and park zones, what does that mean? Whether it's a homeless outreach, is that a need that we are actually be able to connect people to services? I mean, that's our hot team right now. And the challenge is they contact people enough, but sometimes it takes 8, 9, 10 times to get someone into a service, and then oftentimes we don't have the needed services for them. So, but again, these are very legitimate areas of need. I know this is for staff and for residents now, we have done a great job, I believe. I want to echo former Councilmember O'Hara's comments about being good stewards of Measure X money. I sit on the Sandag board where I feel differently about how the Transnet and some of those sales tax measures have been spent. You don't have the accountability that we have. We spend it the way that we told the voters we're going to spend it. We're having a huge impact. But with that being said, I believe in El Cajon and Escondido last election, both sales tax measures there failed. So I think that's something we really have to keep in mind when we add a position. And I've even been concerned with the CSO and the EMT positions, which is why they're contract positions in case we don't get this back on the ballot. I mean, I think in one of the cities, it was the pre-polling for that showed it had 60% support in the city, and then it failed, only got 40% approval on the ballot. So this is a real possibility that we don't get it renewed, but that's incumbent upon us to show the residents. I think our PD, our fire, Assistant City Manager Gossman is really showing we're getting the most bang for our buck with this. We're making impacts. We are getting response times down. For fire, we're getting more ambulances out there. We're getting these different programs, and we just need to keep showing the public and show them why that they should support this again. But again, it'll be a challenge, but I do think we are being very effective in the way we spent it. And again, just be cautious when this does run out and getting it back on the ballot. So if there wasn't a second, I'll second staff's recommendation, or second the motion to approve staff's recommendation.
I think was there?
There was no second.
Okay, so now there is. Okay, great. I do want to say that in my conversations as part of speaking with other mayors in the region, it is the housing, it is a lack of enough social workers and mental health workers that are really not within our jurisdiction. That is the county. And so there's a lot of what I'm hoping, what we've been trying to do is get the county to step up more because we are doing, I think, as much as we can. I mean, there's only, you refer someone, but if you don't have the places to refer them to, I mean, there's right now, it looks like there's a movement to do something within the North County that has to do with rehab programs, and of course, there's a lot of money at the state level, county level, and even federal level with respect to homelessness. So I think it's something that we should look to get. I recently got on the transportation committee for Sandag, and there were a lot of dollars that we could have applied for that have to do with your requests. So I think that the next time they're going to roll it again for grants is in another year or two. But I really like to see us go after those dollars as we are now for Crown Heights. Just really try to find more of those places that we can get those dollars, because I think that if we can just get to the point where it's a city match, we can handle that. But I still feel like the bridge is such a high priority for us because it is becoming a public safety issue. It is, the slabs are, we are in danger of having those slabs fall on someone, but it's that cost that I'm very concerned about too, and having like the will out there to help us get those funds. Was there someone, did you want to speak?
I was just going to speak to the challenge of having people to write grants for these when they're overworked already. And that's like, I don't know, I think it's a real problem.
Right, I think we have is that a contract
Yes, we
arrangement
do.
that
We
we have?
actually do have contract, I think there's 2 or 3 contracts that we have available to assist with grant writing, but to Councilmember Joyce's point that he made earlier, with the grant application becomes a lot of responsibility if in
Right.
fact the grant is granted, because
Right.
then you need to
Overseeing
have the staffing available to manage the project and to manage the grant. It can be pretty overwhelming. So as much as we do try and apply for grants, there is some level of measure at the same time, because we can't overwhelm our staff with several projects and grants to manage at the same time.
Right. So I do think that I heard a consensus to staff, direction to staff, to look at some of the ideas that Councilmember Joyce has recommended, and that council get this information, and certainly before, in plenty of time, so that it could go to the COC, to the, what is it, the initials?
Citizens Oversight Committee.
It was COC, okay. I'm like, is that the Operation Center? No. Yeah. Okay. So we do have a motion, plus to direct staff to look at some of these ideas, see how we can, address them with funding. So we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
Thank you. And we are now on items not on the agenda. Do we have any requests to speak?
We do not.
Okay, well then, this meeting is adjourned to Wednesday, May 3rd at 3:30. Thank you. Thank you all, you all rock, staff. Thank you for helping us through this year and to the next year.